Welcome to the Roar Mindset, Leading Through Chaos. I'm Peter Brandberger, and I help leaders embrace chaos to turn disruption into an advantage. Each episode brings stories and strategies to help you stop fighting disruption, lead with clarity, and thrive in uncertain times. In this episode of Roar Mindset, I sit down with Mike Uhl, who is a senior technology executive and advisor with more than 30 years of leadership experience across global engineering, software, and platform organizations. A former corporate vice president and general manager at Intel Corporation, he led large-scale teams delivering platforms, software, and system innovation for PCs and emergent AI-enabled computing. Today, he advises senior leaders and organizations on strategy, leadership development, and translating vision into operational execution. Based in Bozeman, Montana, Mike works with executive companies and academic programs to strengthen leadership capability, organization alignment, and long-term impact. He is a human-centered leader who shares vulnerably, believes everyone has worth, and assumes positive intent in others. We explore moments from Mike's career where things did not go as planned, early failures that required full system redesign, and later challenges that require full company support. We further explore high-pressure situations where focus matters most and the benefit of delegating what does not. Leadership, as Mike describes it, is not about control. It's about engaging others to move through complexity together. I'll share a few reflection reminders from the episode at the end. Mike is infectiously positive, so get ready for it and enjoy. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining today, and glad you could join from snowy Montana.
Hey, happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, it's been a while since we worked together, but thanks for coming on and talking about how leadership happens and the disruptions going on. And maybe let's just start with a question so people can understand a little bit more about who you are. What matters most to you these days?
What matters most? Well, it's something that's mattered most for a long time, which is people. But specifically, this last, 6, 12 months, I've had a lot more time to spend with family and got some grandkids. And so family matters a lot, had some good times with friends. So that aspect of my life is going really well. And I've also just enjoyed getting to know and engage in a lot of different things around the Montana ecosystem. I've got a lot of legacy relationships and engagement with folks in the, well, West Coast and internationally after so many years in tech. But this last year, I've intentionally spent a lot of time with business leaders, tech leaders, and university locally here and engaged in a variety of different things. So it's been pretty exciting.
Yeah. What are some of those variety that you dabbled into?
Oh boy, I am doing some guest lectures up at Montana State University. I've really enjoyed that. We may end up actually using some of the same stories today. I don't know. We'll see. But both the engineering school and, mainly the electrical and computer engineering portion, and then the business school. They've got a really cool program up there, the management program in innovation master's program in innovation management. Been able to coach a cohort of that and going in on leading a panel here in a couple of weeks. So there's a university engagement piece that's always been good, and I've still retain my ties back to the University of Washington a bit. And then I've got a private coaching business, so I'm doing that on the side, which is a lot of fun. Just, a few clients here and there to keep that, see how I can help folks either in the roles they're in or find new ones. I've also recently joined Lee Hecht Harrison as a senior advisor in their boutique portion, working with executives on transition and mentoring, and also talking to some local nonprofits about some board works. Anyways, and then getting out, doing some fly fishing, spending time with grandkids, and just the outdoors, loving it.
Wow, sounds like a very busy quote retirement.
Yeah, I stopped saying retirement a long time ago. I transitioned, out of Intel, my last job, and then I entered a whole nother phase. And a lot of folks like to call it a portfolio career, which I am fully embracing.
Yeah, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. I've sensed a lot of energy too that you're getting from this new stage.
I am.
What's filling you up?
A lot of it is just paying it forward. I thoroughly enjoyed, we all have our challenges, right? Different times in our roles and things like that. But for the vast majority of the time I spent most recently at Intel, really enjoyed it. I love the people, I love the leadership, I love the engagement, and I love the products we were able to deliver. Transition now, kind of reset a bit. And instead of having one singular focus, you know, tied to a product launch or a tape out or a PRQ or whatever, now I've got a sampling of different things. And pretty much every one of them is involved in helping people. And so, whereas in my previous roles as an employee and as a leader in a large organization, I had to find time to mentor or coach or, advise. Now that's what I do. So it's really exciting to be able to focus on people, more completely from in college, in university, graduates getting ready to go out into corporate world or wherever they may be going, to folks that are later in their career looking for their next step or just trying to navigate the situation they're in. So I'm getting a lot of a lot of fulfillment by helping others achieve more of what they aim to do.
Yeah. And all ages. I mean, grandkids
Yeah.
on up. I'll just,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, I had dinner with some of our grandkids last night, and yeah, it was fantastic, right? So you go from, anyways, yeah, there's a lot of fun, and I
yeah.
get a certain amount of joy trying to learn over time the art of fly fishing. Been doing it a few years. I fished all my life, but truly engaging in a way that honors the sport. That's what I'm trying to
hmm
do now, and
hmm
I'm trying to find things that are both interesting and challenging. Because I've been
Yeah.
told by smarter people than me that if you just focus on things that are interesting but they're not challenging, you'll get bored. So you got to find things that are the combination of both.
Mm.
So
I
that's my
like
key.
that. And this people theme that did you have a sense of this before you left and transitioned into this new
That's a great question. I don't know if I had a sense of anything. I mean, obviously we had senses, or I had some ideas, but in the roles that many of us are in, and this isn't just a technology comment, this is in general, right? I mean, we all work very hard, and I tended to work with a lot of people that had very solid work ethics and really cared about both the customers and the product quality that they were delivering, and that takes a lot of time. And if you add on to that, caring about people in your organization and time for listening and developing a psychologically safe environment and all these things that make a good culture, you don't have a lot of time to be thinking about other things, right? That's a
right.
pretty full plate. So, yes, I had a sense that these are some things I'd like to do, but it wasn't until I actually was able to step back and create a little bit of a vacuum, which quickly filled up. And I have to be really careful, what to keep and what not, um, to really think about those things. And I've had some great self reflection, great conversations with others, and yeah, I'm happy with where things are at.
Yeah, it reminds me of the power of the pause, like just being able to pause and step back and assess what's going on. And yeah, I mean, both when we both left, it's like, oh, you can unplug from that and it
Yeah.
allows you to pause some time, just simply having the time.
Well, I think to your point, even when you're in a role and things like that, that pause is so important. For me, the pause, I traveled a fair amount. And so the pause was on the airplane. You know,
Mhm.
I would pause enough to kind of reflect, and then I would crank out, 5 hours of email. But there would be some time there where you weren't connected to your phone, your internet, pre internet being on airplanes, but you can always turn it off. And you had some time to reflect, not just on your job stuff, but life in general. Cause that was one
Mm,
of the few times where I felt like I was given an environment that helped me pause intentionally.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Good practice for leaders to think about how are they getting that in and taking advantage of things like travel or commute time or whatever is going on in their
Exactly.
life. Yeah, for
Exactly.
me, it was riding my bike to work when I did
Mhm.
was very much one of those pause going in and then unwinding coming out. It really helped. So
Yeah,
that
that
was
was one of the downsides to COVID for me, is because the commute was part of that for me,
mhm.
you know, just decompress before you got home. But when you're home, your office is a flight of stairs away. That a little harder.
Yeah, it's a pretty quick transition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, COVID is one of those big disruptions, and on this podcast we talk about disruptions and embracing chaos and how leaders can go work through it. Do you have some stories you could share about maybe some disruptions you've been through and what you've learned?
Yeah. I mean, so how many hours do we have? Yeah, no, there's lots of stories, and as I think about this, I actually this I mentioned earlier, I might talk about a story I used at the university, but I recently gave a guest lecture to a bunch of seniors in the electrical and computer engineering program. It was their senior design and capstone class. And so, they're working on a project for the full year and all that. And so I actually, dialed up the Wayback Machine and went back to a couple years out of college for me. So this is way, way back for some folks. And here's the setup. So, basically I was a couple years out of college. I was working for a company at the time called Sequent Computer Systems. We were actually, it was very much a kind of a single product company. It was a smaller company. It was actually founded by a bunch of folks at Intel in the early 80s. But the idea was they had this whole new program, a whole new platform they were putting together. And I'm going to date myself just a little bit to throw out the mid plane, the front side bus essentially connection that connected the processor cards to the IO cards to the memory cards. I mean, obviously all this is integrated now. It was a 10 megahertz bus and it was going to 30 megahertz. And that was a huge deal. Anyways, so they asked this, fairly new guy, that'd be me, a recent college grad, to design the bus termination. I mean, it's a mid plane. You got boards. I think it was 18 loads plugging in on both sides. How hard could that be? There's a guy that kind of provided some oversight. One of the founders, actually. It was great. Anyways, so I did the HBICE and I did all this stuff, and we were moving from passive termination to active termination. And I had this whole design. It's like super excited. Anyways, so I'm sitting, a lot of us have been in cubes. I'm sitting in my cube one day, the boards have come back. They're powering it on the set system for the first time. I'm not senior enough to really be in the lab yet. That's kind of the lead technologist and stuff. Sitting there, I still remember it. I mean, this is like the mid 90s. And this one of the senior technologists, walks over to my cube, and you could just tell the body language was like, oh, seems a little odd. And he's like, Mike, I think you should come look at this. And I'm thinking, wow, that didn't sound like, hey, let's go celebrate. So I'm walking behind him to the lab. I walk in there and there's a bunch of people just staring at an oscilloscope. And there's a waveform on the oscilloscope. And I had done enough simulations and stuff to know that that didn't look like what it was supposed to look like. And they asked me, it's like, what do you think of this, Mike? And I'm like, that doesn't look so good. So anyways, what ended up happening is the termination had been designed wrong. And it was a lot more complex problem than was originally evaluated or assumed. And so it was a huge problem. And so the reason I used this at the university is I said, okay, so what do you think happened? Right. And we turned this into sort of a Q&A. So, was I fired? What happened? All this stuff. And everybody had different ideas. But the reason I bring it up is because it was an amazing learning experience. This is where it wasn't, oh, Mike, what did you do? It was from that moment on, I can tell you, I learned more in the next 9 months than I had in the previous 3 years. And I still look back at that as one of the most valuable learning experiences of my career. It was not easy. I mean, what ended up happening is like, okay, all of a sudden I got the help that I needed and probably more than I needed. And I was mentored by one of the best technologists at the company. And we spent, I remember just day after day. I mean, I don't remember seeing daylight and redesigned the design, the termination. Now, the problem was they had to spin every single board that went into that platform because it was the mid
Wow.
plane. So every board,
Yeah.
18 different boards had to be redesigned because of the bus interface. So what I say, and I bring this up because there was a lot of ways that could have gone, but what happened, and this is the culture of that company at that time, was we collectively made a mistake. We allowed this person to take on more responsibility than they were probably capable of. And, that's partly our fault. And what I learned from that is, wow, I mean, someone having your back and also making sure you never make the same mistake again, but you
Yeah.
learn through it and you partner. And the product ended up being delayed a bit, but it launched. It was highly successful. This is back when, database, online transaction processing with Oracle and things like that were really important. And what I'll tell you is literally 30 years later, I was in Oregon last summer and I had breakfast with the guy that actually helped me out. His name is Mark Mellinger, and, still a solid friendship after 30 years. But huge challenge, big opportunity, people rallied, and just one of my life learnings has always been it's about the people, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you create a safe environment, high expectations, but safe environment to potentially fail, but then succeed strongly. Absolutely critical to to a positive work environment.
Yeah, there's two things that came up is just how they even made you aware of it, not coming into your cube and said, "Hey, you screwed up."
Yeah.
Or even when you go in the lab, which by the way, when you were telling the story, I thought it was gonna be burning, like literally on fire. But, just what did they say? "What do you think?" Like, they asked
Yeah.
for your opinion, and you're like, "Yeah, this is not good." And and bringing you into that experience instead of blaming. So, like, they brought you in a welcoming way that was still you knew you messed up, you knew
Yeah.
you had to go fix it, but in a way that wasn't blameful, it didn't sound like.
No. No, because I mean, and this goes to the people you work with. I mean, to a almost to a person, but the vast majority of people I've ever worked with and especially hired have always been harder on themselves than anybody would ever be on them. And when you put somebody in a situation where somebody is, if you talk about the carrot and the stick and they're always leading through a stick or managing that way, you don't have sustained performance and you don't have
Mm,
trust. And so, what they did is it created a self accountability for solving that problem. You can guarantee I was not going to rest till it was solved, but I needed help to do it. And they were there and we all did it together. And at the end of the day, it was a success. But you're right. It wasn't a blame storming type deal.
right.
It was like, oh, yeah, this is not good. Let's go fix it. And I had experiences like that at Intel as well, where we had cultures built up like that, where it wasn't, people rallied to fix things. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just important if you wanted to, especially if you want to establish and deliver high quality.
yeah. And then the other thing was you learning through what I would call a crucible, like, just the intense heat and pressure and, like, you have to do it, and if you're working all the time but you're with other people and you're really forging that bond, and like you said, you still are meeting with these people, but how impressionable this was, many years ago on
Yeah.
forming your time, and I've heard very similar conversations with others about it wasn't easy, but
Oh, yeah.
man, the beauty and the development that came out, there's always some positivity of that chaos or that intensity that can turn into such a memorable and lasting impact.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's
By
yeah.
the way, I could tell you a story about walking into a lab and seeing a system on fire, but that was a 2000-watt power supply in one of those refrigerator-sized computers that had a problem. That was not my problem, but I did notice the smoke. So
Uh,
let's not go down that one. That got solved too.
it wasn't you leading that thing.
Not that one. I wasn't a power supply guy. Yeah.
That's good.
That was back when I was an analog, signal integrity guy. So,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Well, that's great. I like that story and how, you can really dive into it. And for leaders to bring people in, I mean, one of the questions that I heard from somebody else was, how can I help you? Like when
yeah,
you have, like, when you know this is a problem, what help do you need or how can I help you? So you're a partner in that. And this was coming from a customer that somebody on a previous podcast
yeah,
referred to, like customer coming to beat up actually Intel. And they said, "Hey, how can I help you to get this resolved?" Instead of just beating them up, but like, let's get back to production, get back to development,
absolutely.
whatever it is.
No, I mean, because yeah, even with customers, I mean, if you're really partnering closely with a customer and there's an issue, you see that, right? I mean, it's like right now, let's just go figure out how to launch this product in a way that we're both going to be successful, and then we can go figure out what caused it together and solve those problems. But yeah, it doesn't help anybody to sit there and just blame people. I mean, it's all about collaboration. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, great. How about another story? You have some
Oh,
other
that's-
stories to share with folks?
Um. Wow. So let's see. That was in the '90s. So let's go to the 2000s. This was and I hesitate a little bit to throw names out and stuff like that. But you probably have enough people listen to these that have some common Intel background or even people at other companies. So I'll go back far enough that there's enough folks left, inside the company and also at other companies that will remember the product at least. I mean, this was what we called Mahalem at the time, and this was I think what it was effectively the Core One or Gen 1 core. It was a huge deal. It was, the first time that we had moved away from the front side bus, and we went to this quick path interconnect and away from the North Bridge to integrated memory controller, in the same chip as the CPU. We went DDR2 to 3 channels of DDR3. Anyways, it was a really complex project. Again, here you have complexity, things like that. And it was super important to the company. Now, yeah, to tell the story, so that was kind of the setup. And then the opportunity, there was a good friend, Wes McCullough, and I, great partner in engineering. He and I would have to go in every week and report out on design, manufacturing, validation. I had the validation piece. And we were reporting out to Pat Gelsinger at the time. He was as senior VP of the digital enterprise group, kind of owned all the PCs and servers and all that stuff. So it was before, when he was there still, before he left to go to VMware. And we'd go in there, and it was not easy. And there was always big meeting, 20 people in there, whatever. But Wes and I had always present on Halen and say how it was going. So we would do that. It was pretty pressure packed meeting every week because Halen was pretty critical to Intel's future, especially in the server space. And we, there's always issues on every program, but there were some memory controller issues or memory bus issues, I'll say, that kind of kept being persistent. And I remember this, again, this is one of these moments, I was sitting there, I can still remember the conference room, and we're in the meeting, and, Wes and I are presenting, but I was presenting at the time, and I was talking about some of these memory issues. And I remember, and those that know Pat know that he can get, pretty intense. You know, I'd mentioned some issues, and he looked at me and says, "Are you doing everything you can to fix these?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." He's like, "Well, what have you done?" It's like, "Well, I got my whole team on it, working with some partner teams." And he's like, "No, are you really?" This is where the whole crowd goes silent now, right? So now it's me and him. It feels like a one-on-one. And
Mhm. A very
he's like,
public
"No."
one-on-one.
Yeah, exactly. Very public one-on-one. And it was very intentional on his part to set an example, and role
Mhm.
model what it means to be accountable and to go solve a problem. And I'm thinking, yeah, I've talked to everybody, I think at the time it was like his group or whatever. It was a big group. And he starts listing these other groups, and it's like, oh my gosh. And that's like, up through him, the CEO, back down. It's like, no. He's like, well, this is a big issue. You need to go ask. You haven't really asked for all the help you need yet. The whole company is at your disposal. Go figure it out. And this is at a time where there was some targeted layoffs in different places, things like that. So we'd lost some expertise. It was Super Bowl weekend. I still remember. And this is where, at the time, I was working closely with Jay Kirkland, who's leading the Columbia, South Carolina team, had a ton of memory, expertise, chipset expertise, IO expertise. And I remember having to call somebody in Chandler in the Phoenix area the weekend of the Super Bowl, trying to arrange travel out of there to get to the East Coast to solve these problems. But that's when I really realized I was then truly trying to use every resource at my disposal to go fix this problem. So credit to Pat to really let me understand what empowerment truly was and what accountability meant given the empowerment, and then partnering with people across the company, because I did get a lot of great partnership. And this is one of those where I wish I could list name after name after name, because there's so many experts, so many smart people that went and resolved these problems. Now, the other side of this, almost the same time, I was working at the time in John Barton's organization, who was, led validation back then, post-silicon validation. And he had, immense experience. He had his own style and all this. But I remember it was the same week. He like pulls me aside a little bit and goes, "Hey, Mike, what do you think? How's Nahalen going? What's going on?" Because he kind of wanted the side channel view. And I listed off 10 or 15 issues, all the top things of the day. And you could tell he was just listening. And then he goes, I actually had a list, and he points to one of them because this is the one you need to care about. You need to go spend 100% of your time on this. The other ones can be delegated. People will take care of it. They will work themselves out. This is a problem. And I'm like, "Oh, but I'm so busy. I got all these things I got." I was juggling things. I was the ultimate multitasker trying to do that. And he's like, "No, you need to drop things and you need to go focus on this." And he's absolutely right. It was something that we had to resolve, and it took us months of intense work to get that resolved, to get the product out, which we did. But if we hadn't stopped to really focus as much as we did at that point, I don't think it would have been as successful. So, two learnings out of that situation, right? It's, again, tough, complex problem. But complexity and technology is one thing. It's people, it's working together, it's collaboration, it's empowerment, it's leaders, mentoring, guiding and advising, and not chastising and blaming. There's time for retrospectives and analyzing how you got in a situation. But credit to a lot of people in my career that have had the good judgment and the knowledge to know that that will get us out the door faster, high quality product, than running around with our heads cut off. So
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like folks came to you at this time, the empowerment and accountability, but it's also with support.
yeah,
Like Pat was
yeah,
saying, hey,
exactly.
the company is at your disposal. Like that's a pretty big endorsement of support you can get.
It is, but it also goes to show, and this is something I've learned even as I got bigger organizations and things like that, you never control everything. I mean, it's just, even the CEO doesn't control everything, right? You have a board, you have customers, you have partners, you have all these things. So, as you move up in an organization, you tend to think, oh, if I was just a manager, or, oh, if I was just a second level manager, oh, I could solve all these problems. The reality is you can only control so much. I mean, ultimately, it's about your credibility, it's about your influence, it's about your ability to collaborate and set mutually agreed upon expectations of what your goals are. I mean, there's so
Mm,
many things that involve people beyond the challenges of technology. So yeah, I just appreciate in these examples the people having the faith, not just in me, but the fact that they knew the people they could surround me with, which in many cases were way smarter than I was on these problems, that we could solve them together. Doesn't mean there were times, on those programs where in a smaller audience, we were going through and really understanding how we got there. But I mean, the Halen was massively successful. I mean, it really solidified Intel's market leadership in the server space, and workstation for many years. Yeah.
yeah. The other thing that coming to me when you tell about the stories is we talked about the pause. In this case, I think it was coming from people around you, which was kind of pointing out which maybe you weren't focusing on correctly. But it's like the impact of focusing on something, like spending 80% of your time on 20% that really needs your focus or whatever that
Yeah.
fraction needs to be. But it's having that focus and dedication with, I like how Barton put it, or how you Barton put it, which is being able to just delegate, like, trust that other people will manage that and those will get resolved. Work on the ones that, you need to be involved, and it's probably that 20%, and the rest of the 80%, people are gonna solve it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, in an age of AI and things like that, the experience of folks who are battle hardened and have been through those things is super important. I gained a lot from people like that in my career, and that's part of when you ask what's giving me energy. I just recently, was at a tech firm here locally and just, spent time in their lab and spent time with some of their, tech leaders and such, and just was able to share just knowledge that is acquired over decades of what it means to scale, what it means to create a culture. How do you go from a C or a founder led company to a CEO led company? Things like this. There's a thirst for that, and the only way you can kind of quench that thirst is talk to people that have been through that or worked at companies that have successfully navigated that. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to give back.
There is, and to me, what I find is very useful is my experience can help ask questions that they may not even be thinking about.
Yeah.
Like you were just raising, "Hey, how do you scale it?" And you may not even know the answer, but you're just asking the question for them to get them thinking about it, and I don't know, it's a form of mentoring and coaching, I guess, and kind of blurring those 2 lines,
Yeah,
but
it
it
kind of
is
blurs those lines. Yeah.
yeah, that's I like the ability to ask questions that is based on experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and you mentioned it earlier, and I do this almost every time I talk to somebody is, how can I help? Right. Especially when I don't need help myself. Right. I'm just really trying to build a relationship. And it is amazing because sometimes you can't help, but you build that network, people. Oh, I know somebody that actually might be able to help. Right. And then you start to connect that. And it's sure easier down the road to ask for help, or they offer help when you know that you've already done the same. So I really liked what you said about the how can I help? I think that's super
yeah,
important.
yeah. It's a great question for leaders to, probably ask quite often.
I think it's a good question for humans. I mean,
Yeah,
leaders for sure. I think it's a good question for parents, friends, whatever. And there's probably a follow on that says, okay, how can it really help? It's like, okay, there's the superficial, and then there's the, okay, well, let's talk about it. I mean, what can I really do?
Yeah. I mean, like, the first one may be, like, more in a solution space, like, "Oh, I know how to solve this for the person," which may or may not usually is not very helpful, but it's
Right,
really
right.
like, "Okay, what's underneath and how do I, maybe get them more focused or have more comfort in what they're doing or whatever is underneath their."
Well, how many times have you been talking to somebody and they're not sure what help they need, but as they try to articulate that to you, explaining the situation, they actually solve it or they
Mhm.
figure out next steps on their own, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just having a sounding board, having the ability to say something in a space where it's going to be non-judgmental, and you just kind of allows yourself to relax a bit, kind of talk through it and have somebody else listening, and having to articulate it to somebody else is a little easier than letting it just mull in your head.
Well, yeah, I'm a big proponent of engaging with other people, and because it's very rare that you're the only person in this universe that's gone through this or is going through it, and most of the time, it's quite a few people are going through it.
Yeah. Well, and
But the
that's
feeling is that we are by ourselves, like, "Oh my gosh, I got let go
yeah,
of Intel, and I have no, I don't know what to do, and I'm, struggling with this." No, I mean, Intel just laid off a ton of other people, plus the entire rest of the industry, so you're not alone.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true, and that's why I share these stories I share, right? Because they aren't the highlights of my career in the sense of, "Oh, yeah, I mean, I got plenty of stories to say, "Yeah, we delivered this, we did it on time, we had a great team effort, no big issues." I mean, those are fun too. But
Yeah,
the reason that I bring these up because it's being a little vulnerable. It's like I don't like talking about a little bit of me, because there's a little bit of pride. It's like, "Oh, these didn't go as well as I would have liked." But to your point, I mean, by sharing those things, I mean, people go, wow, that was kind of a big deal, but it kind of worked out, right?
yeah,
And hopefully it gives leaders some perspective on, yeah, okay, so I've been through those things before, and how did I deal with it? Or how did the team deal with it? Was it like this and it actually turned out okay? Or actually was it a train wreck because culturally we just, we may have solved it because we've, got everybody in a room, we solved it, but are we going to solve the next problem, or are people going to not bring it up, or are they going to not be
mm,
as
yeah,
dedicated, to go fix it if they don't think they're going to be supported. So that's part of why I do it. It's just to get it out there so people realize, like you said, everybody's got these stories.
yeah. I mean, it's a good reminder to be, for leaders to be vulnerable and open and just kind of sharing what you do, and I know you've always done that in your career, at least that I've seen, and, like, being open, but also acknowledging where like, having humility and acknowledging that, "Oh, I might need some help. I might not have all the right perspectives on a certain situation."
Hmm. And we don't. I mean, we never have all the right,
Right.
whatever it is.
And it's a great to work with others and to be in a community or in engage with your relationships that can help you in times. I'll put it this way: the power of a relationship that know or involving somebody that doesn't know anything about what you're doing is awesome. And I think I've really experienced that more recently about hey, they don't know anything about what I'm doing, but they can ask those interesting questions and different perspectives to go, yeah, I don't know why I'm thinking that way either.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's part of what I've really enjoyed is working with people that are beyond my ability to mentor in the sense of working technology. I mean, I've talked to people, founder of a custom clothing business or HVAC company, or, and there's a lot that we have learned in our careers and just life in general that is valuable experience for them, right? As they go do their thing. So to your point, there's a lot of applicability across different sectors of employment and outside of employment too.
Yeah. And I assume this is happening to you that when I engage with these companies or these different types of activities that I don't know a lot about, I'm learning so much, just as
Yeah.
much as they're learning. So it's a very mutual relation.
Yeah. Well, I was reading something, I think just in the last week. It was talking about, the passage of time. Excuse me. The passage of time seems to go a lot faster as you get older just because, you've got more history and things like
Mhm.
that of time versus when you're small or younger. And one of the things they said, excuse me, is it's better to do something, try to do something unique every day, or, try to insert things out of your normal routine so your brain doesn't just get on autopilot and your memories, just sort of all get formed together. And I can see, I mean, intuitively that makes sense. You're doing the same thing every day. It's kind of like driving to work every day for years. There's parts of the commute sometimes you forget about, right? You drove and you got there successfully, but, and that's where in life, I think it's super important. I'm trying to, live that now by doing things, unique things that force your brain to think differently, meet people, talk to people they're going to teach you things. So I think that's important. Makes living life more enjoyable and maybe feels like it's actually going a little slower, if that's possible, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's appreciating what we have and what we're doing right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The other thing I was thinking about discussing with you is organization and defining an organization, or I know we used to call it architecting the organization. I know how do you figure out which organization is the right way to go do it? And my philosophy on organizations, they're all good and they're all bad. And in other words, there's always a reason or a benefit of doing it, but there's some downside. And it's kind of, how does that align with what your business needs in the future is a key thing, not what it needs in the past. So yeah, how did you approach that? And I know we had an experience on re-architecting an organization and going through, I don't know if you called it a sprint, but it's something like that, where a very focused effort by a few people to figure out what the heck it should be the right way going forward.
Yeah, I mean, truly architecting an organization is one of the hardest things you can do as a leader because I mean, it's very visible. So whatever you do is going to be judged. So you need to be ready for that. I think there are things, and I'll just quick aside, one of the things of being a leader and having leaders above you is you're always critiquing their decisions, right? It's like, why did they do that? I'd never do that. And so I've always tried to assume positive intent, that they have more context than I do, even though that can be very difficult, especially when you have to stand in front of a large group of people and defend the actions of some leaders. But it's common they do have more context and they are dealing
Mhm.
with more variables than and so most people are trying to do the right thing. So I personally try to stay in that mindset. Now, as a leader, I know that not everybody is in that mindset. So just need to be ready to be judged for whatever I do. There are things that are kind of the easy way out, which is kind of putting the folks in roles that, or at least, and this gets not even the architecting organization, folks at a certain level that people expect because of tenure, because of visibility, because of whatever. And those are some hard things not to do. It's very easier to put somebody in a role, if you're trying to create a staff, let's say a direct staff. Well, that person's always been on staff, or that person, has been waiting and they're due, right? Some of the most challenging things I've done is not do that. That's hard, especially if you have a personal relationship with those people. It's
Mhm.
like, I don't think this is the right thing for the organization. And there's times where maybe I've overdid that sometimes, try to start with a clean slate, not appreciate as much of what people can bring. But I think that's one side of it. Now, the other side is you involve people, which I think is important anyway. It's just like interviewing. You don't want to hire somebody without enough other people, at least getting some perspective and some opportunity for input. It's going to be very hard in most cases to integrate that person into the team later. Much like organizations, I think it's important to have other people trusted either in your organization or outside your organization, folks provide you input on what the organization should look like. Now, to do that, you've got to have a strong vision, you've got to have a strong charter, and you need to know what the expectations are for your organization, both culturally and product wise, project wise, to your manager and your partners. So there's a lot of work before you even design an organization. It's just, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
And one of the things I always like to look at is, what are we uniquely qualified to do? What's our unique value proposition?
Yeah.
And I'm not perfect. I mean, nobody is. So I'm telling you my intent. It didn't always go exactly as I wanted, but I think, especially when you're growing a team, it's really important in a growing environment when you've got lots of teams in different places to figure out, what is your team's unique value proposition? What are you uniquely capable of doing that other folks aren't? Because you should really focus on that, because obviously that's the point of failure if you lose that capability because no one else can do it. And it also allows you to focus on that. And if other parts of your role are your charter being commoditized, it's hard to do as a leader and a manager who wants big teams, lots of people, to give things away. But it's hard to keep And it's not necessarily a big value add to keep commoditized aspects of the deliveries of your team. So this is where people will talk about smaller
Yeah.
teams are better and things like that. Well, in many cases they are, if you're really focused on the unique value. Now, I think the situation you're talking about is what we did is, and this was an idea I think spawned by one of the other folks on the same staff as me, but we did these teams of 5 for 7 days. And we basically put 5 people in a task force, said, "Okay, 7 days to go solve this problem. This is what this team needs to execute. What should the strategy look like? What should the organization look like? No names, just structure." And it was, in this case, it was hard because we were trying to merge things. But whenever you're creating new things, that's easier. New roles, more people, everybody kind of gets something. When you're merging or condensing 2 teams, 2 leaders, you need to get down to 1 leader, 1 team in many cases. That's harder. And so we put that together just to force the tension to some extent and then create report outs. And then ultimately, I or others had to make decisions based on that, and we had to live with it. But it did provide at least a voice. And many times it was not consensus, as you would expect, but you heard the pros, the cons on why this should be, what was their recommendation, because you had to force a recommendation too. And there could be
Mhm.
a different perspective also given that said, oh, this is why we don't think, this is the right decision, but there had to be a recommendation. So
Yeah. Like a
I'll let you
dissenting
talk. And
opinion.
that's kind of the overall process we went through.
Yeah. No, I like it. I mean, I love starting with the vision. And question I always ask is, why do we exist? Like,
Yeah.
why do we exist as a team? Which is gets that unique value and what we can do. And if we weren't here, what would happen? Which is
Yeah.
kind of a different way of looking at it. Maybe some of that commoditization piece of it could come up. But yeah, I like the sprint or the 7 days. It makes it very tangible and focused effort, which I assume would help come up with some real outcomes as opposed to let's go work on this and then 6 weeks or 6 months or whatever we may have an idea of what the heck we want. It's just like
Yeah.
it's almost like rip the band-aid off. Let's get this done. Let's move forward. I don't know if you had any of that kind of
No,
mindset.
you're absolutely right. No, that's absolutely it. And in one of the challenges when you talk about architecting an organization is the organization's got several levels and you kind of have to do a lot of time, one level at a time. So if you don't do it quickly, you're talking months to get a full organization out if you've got, enough levels. Now, the levels itself is something you got to look at, and maybe that's an issue that should be addressed. But yeah, ripping the band-aid off, and it's also a way, much like the focus we talked about earlier on the big problem, in an environment where you tend to have, in many cases, out of necessity, if you're a highly matrix, large organization with a lot of different deliverables and things like that, you need to create an environment where you force focus. So you aren't in that situation where, well, let's have a meeting about it. Let's have another meeting about it. Let's pull in this other person. It's like 5 people. You decide if you want to consult with other people, you can do that, but it's you 5 have to come to this decision. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I like this. It's an opportunity for creativity because let's this is a new thing so we can go do something different. It doesn't have to be done, but at least let's put it on the table in the week or whatever. And I love starting with the organization, but no names. Just look like you're starting an entire new company or organization, and these are recs that you would do. Like, what would the recs be, including your own? If
yeah,
if I'm working with the leader, because you probably are shifting because of what else is going on. And then the other thing I love recommending is go do this like on a whiteboard or some analog space. Like go out with colors and crayons and pencils and just keep iterating. Rip it out and do another one and see what comes up. And what I've found is like when you go do that, you're like, yeah, this whole other crazy idea. And maybe you don't do the big crazy idea, but that helped tweak or maybe align the proposal a little bit better.
yeah. No, I totally agree. It's easier said than done to have people do what you said, right? I mean, it's very hard to detach yourself entirely from your potential role, where you want to be in that organization, where you see other people being in that organization, and you just have to watch for that. The other thing that's very difficult is when you start to um, expand the scope of the org or the roles involved across, domestically across different sites, states, and especially geographically, like internationally. Once you do that, now you've got a whole nother level of cultural perspective needs to come to bear on what is the best way to put a leader in place in terms of what geographies is that box, essentially going to be leading. Where is that person going to be based? Are we overly over indexed on North America? Name your favorite geography. It all matters, right? At the end of the day. Yeah. That's why, I mean, these are great. And one thing about a podcast is we can say all this, but the proof's in the pudding in the sense of actually doing these things.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, to our points earlier, having other people you can talk to, in a safe space to walk through some of these things is really important.
Yeah. And to point out where you may not be, as I'll use the word inclusive of
Yeah.
people you need to in your organization and so forth, which obviously today is getting under more and more scrutiny, I think, is as leaders. And I still think it's extremely important to have an inclusive team and bring all these different perspectives in.
Yeah, I think inclusive the term. I mean, all these different words have gotten all these different meanings. But I mean, at the end of the day, for my entire career, I was raised by parents that role modeled everybody is worthy. We're all people, no matter what your role in his life, what you look like, where you came from, whatever. And I just carried that through my life, and I tell people to hold me accountable to that. So inclusive is just a it's a big term that just means a lot, and I think there's people that narrow that down to certain things or judge it in certain ways, but really, I mean, we're all just humans on this planet that wanna, you know, support our families, we wanna move forward, we'd like, to get along, and as you travel the world, that's what you see, right? I mean, there's a lot more similarity anywhere, whether it's, in the United States where we are here, in other countries, or even between countries. It's just
Yeah.
been one of the most fulfilling parts of my career is getting to know people in other countries, see the similarities, and just really learn and appreciate some of the differences.
Yeah. I mean, the two things from this conversation is people, and I forget the words you use, but they have good intentions. They're not trying to be bad.
Yeah,
Like
super
those
positive
two,
intent.
yeah, positive intent. So people and positive intent. That sounds like a very foundational thing from,
Yeah, it is. I mean, I was able to continue it, through my last role, but every quarter or so, I meet with all the new employees that joined the organization, and I introduced myself, we would go through what the team does, and then I would talk about what our team culture is. And one of the things I would tell them is, we'd go through things like this and say, okay, you're fully empowered to hold me and my staff accountable to these sort of behaviors and this sort of cultural representation. So call me out if you don't see it,
yeah,
and yeah, it was good. It helped create a sort of a safer environment, made the open forums a lot more exciting, that's for sure, because people would ask anything.
yeah,
But that's okay.
yeah,
That's the way you form a team.
that is good. All right, as we wrap up, I have a couple of questions. I think the
Yeah.
first one is maybe what is a one leadership or a few leadership lessons you've learned from fly fishing?
Oh, from fly fishing. So, the first one would be it's good to be prepared. You'll have a better experience if you go in well equipped. As a leader, you should go in well equipped, and that can mean a lot of different things. Another is that it's an art. It is not a strict science. I mean, you can learn all you can about aquatic insects and river temperature and different flows and things like that, and that's all helpful. I think that goes into the be prepared sort of mentality, but it's an art. And like anything, there's unpredictability aspects to it. And you need to kind of enjoy the process, not just the end result. So fly fishing to me, especially in this last year or so, has become much more than, oh, I want to catch a fish. I do want to fish, but it's the experience of going out, letting down, being in the outdoors, just reflecting on just all the beauty around you and the while trying to do something that's both interesting and challenging. So
Yeah,
it checks both boxes. I think leadership's like that. And that's why I enjoy helping other leaders with their journeys.
yeah, that's great. I agree. It is an art and something you should be prepared for.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. The second question is, what is the one word that represent your leadership mindset today?
Mm. Um, so I think, it's funny. I listened to a couple of these just to try to prepare, see what your style was and how these were going to work. And I listened to one with Josh Newman. And he used the word, I think, curiosity or be curious or something like that. I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, that's the one I probably would have thought of. So I'm not going to use Josh's. That's a good one, though. I think that was good. I think it's two words. So I'm going to ask for a little forgiveness, but I'm going to say servant leadership because I think that exemplifies what I aspire to be as a leader. It's not the role itself, especially as I had the opportunity and was blessed with more senior roles. It was, how do I use the positional power for good?
Mhm.
Because there are certain things that come along with seniority. I mean, just it's true in life. And how do I maintain connection with folks who may not have that, but have just the absolute best ideas or the best intent? And how can I get behind that and make that either happen or support it? So so yeah, servant leader would be my.
And how would you define servant leadership?
I mean, I would define it as somebody who leads not for the glory or the fame or the accolades, but leads in order to better enable their team, folks in their team and their partners to achieve what they're seeking to achieve. So it's kind of putting others before you. Now, I don't want to make it sound like, I am, I do everything for everybody else. I don't ever do anything for myself, but, because there's a certain amount of stuff you have to do yourself to even achieve the leadership roles you get. But in the process of doing that, I don't believe it should be on the backs of others. I believe that a lot of those things happen as a result of building good partnerships and helping team members and helping them grow in some cases beyond you, right? I mean, it's like, how do you do that? So it's really about eh, helping others feel support and the guidance necessary to achieve what they can do with the expectation that what they're doing is going to have a positive outcome, not just for
Mhm.
themselves but for others. So it's,
Yeah.
it's not at the expense of me to do something else if it's not going to result in something good, but ideally it would.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I like that definition. Yeah, really helping. It comes back to being human-centered kind of leader and people and what we've talked about today.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'll ask the last question too, which is what is the one leadership lesson you continually learn over and over again?
I think the wow, that's a good one. To learn over and over again is to well, it goes back to staying curious, and you need to be a continuous learner. So to stay relevant, your experience is good, but your experience does have a shelf life to some extent. Some things are good forever, but the context of the environment that leaders, if we're talking about leaders specifically, are leading in is changing dramatically
Mhm.
as we watch it. I mean, AI is the monumental change in the ecosystem right now, but you have to stay up on top of things like this so you can help leaders navigate it. And it's kind of this combination of taking the latest in technology and understanding what that technology is bringing and the challenges and the opportunities, and at the same time taking decades of experience and applying it into it, because some of the advantage people and employees and others who are going to be in roles as we go forward is that experience. It is the judgment. It is just that human value that you bring to the technology that's becoming more and more pervasive and can accomplish so much more. So there's a marrying of those two things that I think are super important. So to keep curious is important. So you can provide
Yeah.
that. And I'm gonna supplement that though with it kind of goes to the theme we talked about. The the lesson that I continue to learn is there are people out there that know a lot and may not know a lot about exactly what you're doing, but can ask good questions. So I think it's very important for anybody, but especially leaders as they become more senior and lonely, because leadership can get very lonely in the
Mhm.
sense of, who do you trust? Who can you share things with? That's where I think coaching, that's why, I've got I'm in a couple coaching roles, one for a company and one I form my own company, and I really enjoy that aspect of helping leaders with a safe environment so they can lead better, share things, and then move forward. So I think one is stay curious, keep learning, so you can become stay relevant. The other is know that having a sounding board, finding people to talk to in a safe space is also going to help your leadership, and know that we can all use that whether we acknowledge it or not.
Yeah. No, those are great lessons to remind people of and ourselves, I'm sure, at least for me,
Yeah. Oh, for
um,
sure. I remind
staying
myself that.
curious and keep evolving.
Yep.
Well, thanks for thanks for joining today, and good luck with all that's ahead with engaging with Montana. I think Montana's lucky to have you. Oregon has a loss, but Montana has a gain. Yeah, hopefully everything is going well and you're engaging with the community there.
Yeah. Well, I don't see it as a loss gain, it's a net add. It's just expanding my reach and my engagement, and everybody I've met and engaged with in the past is still there. I'm just meeting new friends and fellow co-travelers, and it's
Great.
exciting. So, thanks for having me on the show. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Great
Well, thanks.
conversation.
Thanks for joining.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. 3 reflections from my conversation with Mike Uhl that you can apply right away. Assume positive intent. It is easy to form a quick judgment or bias, especially when you feel certain you understand someone else's perspective. This is the moment to pause, stay curious, and ask yourself what might be their positive intent. This simple shift can change the conversation and open new possibilities. Sounding board. Leadership can be isolating. You need people you can think out loud with, people who will challenge you, support you, and help you see what you cannot see on your own. Ask yourself, who do I go to? And do I need more of them? Don't navigate leadership alone. And last is inclusion. Mike shared a simple but powerful belief: everyone is worthy. That has not changed regardless of political or company culture around you. He reflected that one of the most fulfilling parts of his career was getting to know people across the world, seeing their similarities and appreciating the differences, which I share with him. Reflect on this and take one step toward this mindset. Please check out Mike Uhl Coaching and Insight on LinkedIn to see how he is helping leaders sharpen focus, lead intentionally, and grow with purpose. Thanks for listening to Roar Mindset, Leading Through Chaos. Disruption isn't going away, but you can embrace it and turn it into an advantage. Until next time, stop fighting disruption, lead with clarity, and thrive in uncertain times.